Have you had to deal with the grief police? People who want to control how you deal with your loss? I'll cover 3 common things the grief police say. The grief police aren't the people in blue who protect and serve. The grief police are people who assume there are strict rules for grieving correctly or incorrectly and believe it's their job to regulate your grief. The grief police have lots of ways to tell you what you're doing is wrong, but here are 3 specific unhelpful things that the grief police say. Please don't join the grief police. The rallying cry of the grief police is some version of, "You're doing it wrong. You're not staying busy enough, you're not praying enough, you're not focusing on happy things, you're not practicing enough gratitude." According to the grief police, whatever you're doing or not doing is wrong. This is based on the assumption that there is a very narrow range of appropriate ways to grieve, which of course isn't true. In fact, there are so many different styles and ways to grieve, and many of them are healthy and normal, and you're simply trying to find something that works for you for this particular loss. This statement goes beyond "you're doing it wrong" to include a very specific recommendation that they keep suggesting over and over. Here's a pill, here's a movie, here's a mantra, here's an exercise class. It could be anything. But the assumption is that if you just do this one thing, your grief would be over, and I know it because it worked for me. Now, there's nothing wrong with providing advice and recommendations. I recommend books and resources and strategies. The difference is in the intensity of the sharing and the assumption that grief can be fixed with one simple cure-all. The reality is that grief is a result of a spiderweb of different factors, and there's certainly not a simple one-step strategy to end grief. Wait until someone asks for assistance and perhaps bring up something that might be helpful once, but mostly focus on listening and just being there for them. The grief police are often the first one to say or imply that you shouldn't discuss your loved one who died. They may believe that grief is best dealt with in silence, and they will want you to return to exactly the way you were before. They don't want you to mention your memories, your struggles, or anything connected to your loss. So these are 3 common messages you'll get from the grief police. You're doing it wrong, just do what I did, or let's not talk about it. The truth of the matter is that there is more than a single way to grieve. Grief is not something to be cured, and there's not some magic bullet that will take away the pain of grief. And finally, it's unreasonable to expect a bereaved person to go back to the way things were and not be able to share their grief. Unfortunately, you may have some grief police around you, but I hope this helps you identify these unhelpful messages. The best thing you can do is simply avoid the grief police and surround yourself with people who are supportive where you are in your grief journey and your personal grieving style. I'm curious to hear about your comments regarding your experiences with the grief police, and I hope you'll share this with others. If you're struggling with your grief, you may find my online grief plan program and other resources to be helpful. You can find all my resources at griefplan.com.